How you doing? My name is Isaiah Porter, and today I want to share my testimony with y'all in the hopes that it would encourage people, that it would make Jesus look more beautiful, and the fact that it will allow you to remind you that you're not alone, that you're not doing this by yourself, that there are many Christians throughout the world that have experienced what you've experienced and they're still going strong. And I just hope that my testimony, my truth about Jesus in my life can encourage you. To a Puerto Rican mother and to a black father, lived most of my younger life on the west side of Chicago, Humboldt Park area. As I got older, we ended up moving to the north side, but that's a little bit on. So with us living in Humboldt Park, I grew up surrounded by gangs. I lived with my father for a lot of my younger years because my mother was in and out of my life. She's just, without trashing my mom, she's just somebody that never should have had children. She was very verbally abusive. She was very neglectful. She would leave and be gone for months and weeks at a time. She would leave me and my brother at home for days at a time with $50 on the table. I'm talking about when we were like, I can remember early as maybe being first grade, and my brother might have been in like fourth, fifth grade. She just never should have been a mother. She didn't really want to be a mother. She didn't like responsibilities. She didn't want that aspect in life. She also had a pretty horrible life herself growing up, but she kept the generational curse going rather than choose to break it. But hey. So, growing up in Humboldt Park, I ended up idolizing gangs. There was Latin Kings, there was Spanish Cobras, there was Maniacs, and there was all these different gangs around. Everyone, not everyone, a lot of people that I went to school with, their older siblings were involved in gangs. They had family members that were involved in gangs. Most of my family was not involved in gangs. Like, I have two older sisters that had friends, but they themselves were not involved. My older brother did have some affiliation with gangs, but I didn't really know it. He kept it pretty hidden. But mostly my love for gangs came from just what I saw in the community around me. For example, I remember one time seeing some guys, and I don't know what gang they were in, smashing outside of our front window in our living room. We lived on a corner apartment, and we were right there on the corner, and in the living room had a corner, two windows, and you can see right there both sides of the street. And right across the street was a little bodega, and there was a car parked out front, and there's these gang members, I don't know what gang, and they were smashing the windows of the car, screaming all kinds of stuff. I was really little. I might have been like in second grade. And I remember looking like, oh man, that was just mind blown, scared, but yet thought it was kind of cool at the same time. And my father came from behind me and was just like, see, that's why you don't do drugs, son. That's what drugs do to you. And pulled me away. What could he say? Well, that's rival gang matters and this and that. Man, he said good enough, I believe. But seeing things like that, hearing gunshots, knowing people that had got killed or their older siblings that got killed, it just kind of, and seeing how these gang members were respected and seeing how, not like they were glorified, but feared. And I viewed fear as something, as respect. So I kind of grew up idolizing that, thinking that it was great and it was cool, and that's what Puerto Ricans did. That's what black people did. Foolish, stupid idea, but that's what I thought. If I'm just being just totally honest with you guys, that's what I thought as a little boy in about like third grade. My brother, when he was in high school, ended up getting in trouble through his affiliations with gangs. And I don't want to share too much of his story because that's his story and I don't want to do that. But he ended up getting in some trouble and his life was now threatened. So my father was like, that's it. We got to get out of Humboldt Park. We got to get out of the city or as far as we can. So he moved us up to the north side, just outside of city limits in a suburb called Evanston. And we moved up there when I was about in the fifth grade. And that's where I ended up meeting one of my friends that was going to be a huge influence in my life and actually helped me lead down the road to gangs and street life just in the 5th grade. And we became friends. And I remember one time, now the situation between Westside Humboldt Park and growing up in Evanston, are the gangs different? Yeah. Are Humboldt Park gangs way more violent, way more aggressive in your face? Absolutely. Is Evanston a perfect place to live? No, by no means. It's a great place to live. It's a decent place to live, but it's still very much influenced by Chicago. It still very much has gangs. You got Gangsta Disciples up there. You got small pockets of Spanish Gangsta Disciples. You got small pockets of Vice Lords. You got Latin Kings over off Clark. You got different gangs up there. You got Peace Stone Rangers out there. And there's some other small pockets of different sets and cliques all over the place. Is it as crazy as violent as Humboldt Park? No. But is gangs still very much infiltrated and a part of the Evanston community? Yup. I'm gonna be real. Is it a lot cleaner? Yeah. Is it better schools? 100%. Is there a lot more money up there and everyday normal people? Yup. But is there still gangs in the infiltrated area? 100%. That's just true. So with me already having this love and desire to be a gangster, to be a gang member, and going up there didn't really fix much. That sin and that evil and that wickedness, the devil already had my heart at a very young age. He had found something and dangled something in front of me that I thought was beautiful, that I thought was cool, that I thought was powerful, that would give me respect and status and all of these things. And it was just a complete empty promise, to be perfectly honest with you. And by the time I need to fill in a little bit of blanks. When I moved to the north side with my dad, my mom was pretty far removed from my life. I would see her 2, 3, 4 months would roll by, and she would pop up with some gifts and wanting to spend time, but then she'd be gone for a couple more weeks. Or maybe me and my brother would go to her house a couple of times, a weekend here, a weekend there, and then she'd be gone for a couple of more weeks. She was very inconsistent, and just really didn't want to be a mom, in my opinion. Because when I think about my daughter and my son, there's no way. There's absolutely no way that I would not want to be there every single day. My son finds a way to get under my skin like nobody else. But there's no way I would want him anywhere else but with me. There's no way that I would want to be anywhere else but with him at all times. And I would do whatever it would take to be around my family all the time. So that's why I say I don't believe my mother ever really wanted to be a mother or have kids. But anyway, so we were on the north side. We moved up there because my dad was trying to get my brother, who had some involvement with gangs, but I don't believe he was a gang member, but he did have some affiliation. He was trying to get him away from the life-threatening situation he had, and he, in the same hopes that completely get me away from gangs as well. But as a lot of people's experience would know, in Chicago, it's everywhere. It's in the far north suburbs, far south suburbs, far west suburbs. It's deep in the city. It's entrenched. Chicago's just a gangbanging city. It's a beautiful city, but still nonetheless a gangbanging city. So we moved up there to the Evanston area. I started playing sports, getting in school, but I had that one friend who was just like me, who was in love with the idea of being a gangster, of that lifestyle of the streets. Now for me, even though my father was a great father, he was always there. He was at every parent-teacher conference. He was at every sporting event that he could possibly be at. He was there. My father took us everywhere all over the city. If he was going somewhere, we were there with him. But with my mom being gone all the time, it made me feel like my family was broken. It made me feel like that my family wasn't real. And to be honest, my family was petty at times. There's always somebody not talking to somebody cutting somebody off. And I just always had this feel of like my family's not a real family, it's broken. And I thought I could find that in the streets. I thought I could find the love that I did not feel from my family, that I was getting, but as a young child was just confused. Didn't understand it. Didn't know what it means to be from a broken home. Didn't know what it meant to have a mother that was verbally abusive, and understanding that that wasn't my fault. Not understanding that this was her sins. These were her burdens that she was trying to project on me. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I was trash. I felt like I was the problem at many times. And I felt like because of the things she was doing that I couldn't trust her, that could I really even trust my dad? Can I trust my siblings when they said that they loved me and they would never leave me? I didn't believe it. I thought my family was broken. And in many ways it was. Um, but like I said, I had a good father, loved me. He was there for me as much as he possibly could have. But still felt like my life was broken. I didn't understand that what I was craving truly was Jesus. I didn't know it. I had no verbiage for it. I had no framework for it. I had no idea, but knowing and feeling something was broken, something was wrong, something was missing. And it was. It definitely, truly was. So I ended up just always being outside in the streets. And up there, there's predominantly just one gang. I know I've said a bunch of different gang names, but I don't specifically want to say what gang that I was involved in because I don't want to glorify it. And that stuff's still very much real. I don't live in the Chicago area no more. I'm down south, but I still got family up there. And old stuff always comes back. So I'm going to refrain from saying the names of any gang that I was involved in. But fast forward towards high school, I started playing football and started getting in the streets. And my freshman year is when I actually joined the gang that I joined, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved fighting rival gang members. I loved being on the block. I loved having people know, oh, that's Big Zay. He's a member of da-da-da-da-da. I loved it. I like people knowing, don't mess with that dude. Not only is he really big, but he's a member of blah, 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 blah. I loved it. It was respect that I thought I deserved. It was the fear that I always saw in rap videos and in movies and being in the streets and other gang members that I idolized when I was younger. I felt like I had it now. And to be honest, in many ways I did. And I felt like I had that family that I thought I didn't have. A family that told me they were proud of me for doing bad, horrible, wicked deeds in the streets. And that they were quick to call my name when something was about to go down. When we need to handle some business, call Zaya. Quick towards it. And I would be there. And I was proud of it. So the streets fulfilled, or at least I thought was fulfilling, a hole in my heart. And I just went deeper and deeper. And I eventually just kind of stopped caring about football, never really cared about school in the first place. And I just wanted to be in the streets. I didn't care if I died in the streets. In my mind, what would be better than to die in the streets? In fact, I remember one time there was a member of a fellow gang. They were not the same gang, but within the same nation. And we all kind of looked up to him because, he was a big bro in the streets. And he was on a crotch rocket and he had gotten a really bad wreck. And man could barely breathe. He was struggling. He was all mangled and bloody. And when the ambulance had came, I wasn't there, but when the ambulance had came and they put him on the stretcher, when they were putting him inside the ambulance, he threw up his gang sign. And that hit the streets, and that had everybody like, man, he's dying like a straight G, man. He's out there, even though close to death, he's out there throwing them up. That I thought was beautiful. I'm not going to lie, I'm just be 100% with you. I thought that was beautiful. I thought he was the straight man for that. He didn't end up dying, but he was in the hospital for like a couple of months, and he was really close to death. And that just emboldened me more. Die in these streets. What more do you got? How stupid is that? But that's how I felt. And the more I got in the game, the more I just felt like family. But to be honest, I saw more of the lies, the BS, the nonsense, people not truly living what they said they were. And then at the same time, the law was getting closer and closer and closer to my door, and the streets was getting closer and closer and closer to my door. Um, like rivals had ended up shooting at my crib, where my dad and my brother and sister lived. Well, my brother didn't live there at the time, but that was a legit wake up call. The school was calling my dad to inform him, your son is a gang member and he's causing a lot of craziness in these streets. Cops found out that the local police department had an investigation on my set going, that they were trying to shut us down. We were one of the wildest sets at that high school at the time. And they were working with my dad, my football coach, and different members of the community to try to take us down. So I had the streets coming closer to my door, literally. The cops inching in at my door trying to take me down. And then I felt this family unit that I believed in and thought we were all ride or die. We always had each other's back, starting to crumble. And in fact, it was one of my homies, the only person from Chicago really that I still keep up with. His girl at the time ended up sleeping with the chief, and members of this gang tried to cover it up. And it broke my heart. Something so simple, something so stupid and trivial. Now, yeah, this is all high school love, romance, BS, but still, nonetheless, how are we ride or die if you messing with his old lady on his birthday, no less? So here I am, potentially going to get myself locked up, get myself killed. For what? This family that will do this nonsense, that will mess with a homeboy's old lady? And I was starting to get scared. I was starting to understand the weight of my actions and the reality of my life. Like, people wanted to kill me. The cops wanted to put me away. I'm not even 18 yet. And my dad ended up confronting me. It was just like, no son of mine is going to be in the gang. We're moving. You're out of here. We're leaving. We're going to go to the next suburb over. But to be honest, that wasn't enough. That wasn't far enough. And it made me upset with my dad because I'm like, that's not going to do nothing. I'm just going to stay in the streets and do my best. Well, I ended up talking to my mom, and her idea was to try to move me away to my uncle. And I know my mom wasn't very dependable, but it was the best shot that I felt I had, was to get out of the streets by completely getting out of Chicago, getting out of Illinois, and moving down south. So that's what I did. I ended up moving in with my aunt and uncle and started afresh down south. Now, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Graduated high school and was working my first job. And I was just aimless. Didn't have no real goals. Barely had a high school education. And didn't really know what to do with my life. And I found myself working at a steel mill on second shift. And at the time, I was living with one of my female friends. I wasn't involved with her, but one of my female friends. And her family was meth heads. Like, most of her family was on meth and any type of drugs they can do and whatnot. Smoking weed, I mean, we all did. But living with them, had a job, and I was just living in redneck country, hating life. Like, my whole idea of playing football, I Decided to throw that away. My whole idea of being a gangster living in the streets came at me harder than I ever really imagined. Um, like it tends to. um, and I was just in the country living with meth heads working at a steel mill. Not the worst life, but definitely not what I saw for myself. Not who I thought I was going to be. And I'm living at this place, and these meth heads didn't work. I was paying most of the bills. They called themselves trying to sell meth, but they weren't really good at it because they were just doing it all the time, getting real geeked up, trying to play guitar in their 50s and 30s, thinking that they were going to be the next great American rock band, and they weren't. And here I was working, flipping most of the bills with one of the other guys that was living there's girlfriend who was also working, and we were pretty much splitting all the bills, taking care of like 6, 7 people. I was hating life. I was working a lot of hours, taking care of meth heads, saw no future in my life, and just wasn't who I thought I was supposed to be. Still, here again, with this hole in my heart, hole in my life, feeling like something ain't right because it wasn't. But I didn't understand. I didn't know. And I remember I had just got paid and paid all my bills, paid everything, and I had nothing. As soon as I got paid, I was broke. And I was like, man, what am I working for? What am I doing? I'm like 19 years old, living deep in the country with meth heads and working at a steel mill, working all these overtime hours with no money to my name. And I was hungry. Yeah, I was big back then too, but still, I was hungry. And I asked a guy to borrow $1. And it took a lot I had, everything I had, just to ask to borrow $1 so I can go get like a Snickers out of the candy machine because I was hungry. And he ended up borrowing me $1, and I put the dollar in the machine, and it ate my dollar. And I about lost it. I was angry. I was mad. I was trying to fight back tears. I couldn't understand how is this my life? And I'm hungry. And I was just heartbroken. I was just so heartbroken that machine ate the $1 that I had to build up the courage to ask to borrow because I just got paid and I was broke, living with meth heads. I was so angry. I was so hurt. I was so broken. And there was this one guy who had been trying to tell me about Jesus for the longest time, and he used to irritate me. Mostly because he was just so even kill. No matter how hard work was, no matter what was going on in his life, he just seemed to have this peace and calm about him. And he'd always want to talk about Jesus. And that just made me mad. I was like, oh, just get out. Just get out of my face. And our shift was over that day, and the stupid machine ate my dollar. And I'm sitting outside of work about 45 minutes after we got off work. Mostly everyone's gone. I'm waiting on these meth heads to come pick me up from work because that was part of their job, was to come bring me back and forth to work. And here I am 45 minutes later waiting on them still. And I was just hot and broken and mad and sad and just depressed and kind of angry at God, even though I didn't really believe in God. But just wondering, like, how did I get here? And around that time, here comes this guy who's been telling me about Jesus, walking out after being inside for an extra 45 minutes, cleaning up his workstation, off the clock, not getting paid, comes walking out and was whistling. And it just made me so mad that I had to ask. I remember asking him, I said, how do you do it? And he turns around and he's like, what? I said, how do you do it? How do I do what? How are you just so happy all the time? How do you do this thing, life, and be so content when life ain't that great? I mean, we're working in a steel mill. And he came up to me and he was just flat out looking at me and says, because of my God, Jesus. Because of what and who he's been to me. And then he began to tell me his testimony. And I'll be real with you, I started crying. I was just bawling like a baby. Because at that very moment, Jesus seemed beautiful and far away, but so close at the same time. I can't really explain how I felt. Those of you that are Christians know what I'm talking about. And for the first time, I just felt like there was some hope. I felt like there was a chance for me to be happy and to have a decent life again. And I'm there at this point, like an hour after we got off work, crying in this guy's arms that I really don't know that well, telling me about Jesus and telling me the gospel and that who Jesus is and how I need him and I'm nothing without him. That feeling I've been feeling in my life of emptiness and brokenness and a yearning was really for him, and I had no idea. And at this point, I was willing to try it. I was willing to listen and hear about God. And he invited me to his church, and I said, "Man, I'm not going to church. I'm not ready for church, man. I've done too much dirt. I got too much sin to be going to church." And he told me I was ridiculous, and he was right, but I didn't want to hear it. And he decided, well, he told me about this Bible study that he was having on, I believe it was Wednesday nights, after work. On Wednesday nights for an hour, our job would allow a couple of the men to have a Bible study in the break room after a shift. He got permission and they allowed it. Nowadays, I don't think they would allow that, but back then they did. So he invited me to it, and I said I'd come. And around that time, here comes my ride coming to pick me up. And I'm like sitting here trying to draw the tears and act like I'm a man, I'm tough. I'm gonna be there, man. I'm gonna be there. And I go home. I get high, and I'm surrounded by meth heads in the living room playing guitars, talking about how they're gonna make it. I end up going back to work and on day to day, hanging out with my friends over the weekend, and I kind of have back some of the old same feelings, like, man, you're being stupid. You just got caught up in emotions. There's no God, and if there is God, he don't love you and he ain't real. How ridiculous is that? But that's what I was feeling. But still, there was this draw, this allure. I decided I'm going to go to that Bible study. And all of the bogus, busted stuff that's really easy, that to just, destroy the Bible, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to disprove it. I'm going to let these guys know that they believe in something stupid. And going to that Bible study and reading God's word is where I met God. Where God broke down and showed me who he was in his word. It started off with a testimony. Well, really, it started off with someone living a godly life at all times. And then from there, it gave the appointment to sit down with me and tell me their testimony and tell me about Jesus. And then from there, it came to me actually sitting and reading his word and coming to know him. And then shortly after, I was excited and ready to go to church. And in stepped Jesus. And after that, it was a wrap. After that, I went and became a missionary. After that, I went and did children's ministry to adult ministry to preaching and teaching. Went to seminary. Went to Bible college. I didn't finish seminary, but I did start and attend and Bible college. And from the age of 19 years old, I'm 34 now, I have been on a beautiful, wild, blessed life for Jesus and with Jesus. There's been high seasons of just, ready to charge hell with a squirt gun, and low seasons of just feeling like I wasn't it, or just still some sin and debauchery, to back and forth, and it's just been my road with God. and how he's changed my life, and how he's still changing my life, and how he's called me to repentance, and how he's used me for his kingdom, and how he's going to continue to use me. So that's why I'm sharing my testimony, because God uses broken men to build his kingdom. And that's exactly what I am, a broken man that is being uplifted and rebuilt by Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior and my King. And I believe he can do the same for you. Not that I believe, I know he can. So if you're feeling down and out, if you're feeling broken, if you're just needing encouragement, listen to this story. That if God can take a gangbanger from Chicago, from a broken home, and bring me to Africa, to the mission field, to bless others, he can do the same for you. Maybe your story's going to be different. Maybe you'll be similar. I don't know. But Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father but through him. I love you. I'm your big bro in Christ. And that's why I'm starting this YouTube channel. Is to help come alongside and build you up and encourage you and send you into the world so that you can do the same thing, be the light to the whole world which God called us to do. In Jesus' name, I love you.